Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name's Mary English. You can find me at www.maryenglish.com, maryenglish.co.uk and UK Astrologer. And just a little plug at the moment, if you pop over to my website, there's a 20% discount code on there. And all you need to do is to enter your email address and you will have the code revealed and you can have 20% off a number of different readings. And just to also let you know, I have returned to doing palmistry readings face to face or online. Now the pandemic is definitely out of the way. So with that intro, now this week, just to talk to you again about, there are guests coming on. There is going to be a guest next week, but this week there was a news item that was in the news, and I don't know about you, but if anything unusual, different, or I don't know, whatever turns up in the news, I always like to check the chart or charts of the people concerned to see if I can get an understanding of why something might have happened. What was it about that person's chart that didn't help? Most astrologers are curious beings, and I'm always asking the question, why? And obviously we don't always get the answer to the why, but yeah. So I will put the links to where I'm quoting from today so you can check it out yourself if you like. And if you're listening on YouTube, you'll be able to see the charts at astromary.libsyn.com. All the show notes are there. So this is a news item from the 15th of September 2025. And this is a statement from the CPS, which stands for the Crown Prosecution Service. Updated with sentence, couple convicted of manslaughter after death of newborn baby. Constance Marten and Mark Gordon were sentenced today at the Old Bailey, 15th of September 2025, for gross negligence, manslaughter following the death of their newborn baby. Mark Gordon was sentenced to 14 years imprisonment with an extended period on licence of 4 years. Constance Marten was sentenced to 14 years imprisonment. They were also sentenced to 18 months imprisonment for concealing the birth of a child, 18 months imprisonment for cruelty to a child, and 5 years imprisonment for perverting the course of justice. They will serve these sentences concurrently. Now, I won't mention too much more about that. What I want to do is to show you the charts, because on the CPS website was both of their dates of birth. Now, I hadn't been particularly following the story in any great detail. Some stories, I don't know about you, some stories I probably follow in more detail than others, but this was a retrial because they'd been so disruptive at their previous trial, sending each other's notes, interrupting people, wanting to have drinks, wanting to leave the room, interrupt, then giving their own evidence, etc. There had to be a retrial, and it was at this retrial that they were sentenced, thankfully, because they didn't do the right thing. Now, what I'm going to go through today is what happens on the negative side of a particular planetary placement. Now, obviously, with every chart, there's a positive side to a particular planetary placement, but this is a very big example of what can happen on the negative side. So we have two people, Constance and Mark, and we'll start with Constance. She was born on the 16th of May 1987. I don't obviously have a time of birth for her, and I'm not too sure about the location, but I've used London. She might have been born somewhere like Dorset or Devon or wherever, because she came from a rich family and her father had some sort of, I don't know what the word is now, but he had some sort of aha moment when he inherited a great big stately home, and he didn't want to have all the money or anything, and he left the family and just decided to disappear to Australia. He's still alive, and during the drama of the whole story, he did make a statement asking his daughter to turn herself in. So this is Constance's chart. She's got the Sun 24 degrees Taurus, the Moon 1 degrees Capricorn, Mercury 5 degrees Gemini, Venus 25 Aries, Mars 26 Gemini, Jupiter 17 Aries, Saturn 19 Saggy, Uranus 25 Saggy, Neptune 1 Capricorn, Pluto 8 Scorpio. I've used whole signs so you'll be able to see in the chart more easily exactly what the aspects and the shape of the chart is, which is very much a seesaw. Now, Constance has, and this is what this particular podcast is about, Moon and Neptune conjunct. Now, the Moon, as we know, is how we mother and how we feel we have been mothered. So it might not be actually how we were mothered as a child, but it's what the Moon is, how we expect to be mothered and want to be mothered, even if we're not. Now, luckily, we also have the date of birth of Constance herself, and just to put into a nutshell, what the story was about is that the couple had 4 previous children who'd been taken into care by social services because they were absolutely incapable of looking after them. And then when it was discovered that she was pregnant again, and I can't remember what happened now. That's right. She was spotted somewhere or other, and they caught her on camera being pregnant again. They knew she was pregnant, and this time she was going to avoid being caught, inverted commas in her words, by social services. She didn't want this 5th child to be put into care. Not that she'd looked after the 4 previous ones. Her and Mark had not turned up to appointments that were made to meet their children. They'd abandoned them, so they'd been taken into care, but it wasn't as if they'd gone continuously and cared for these children and showed them lots of love, etc. They didn't. So social services obviously were concerned that if she was going to have another child, she was such a risky human being, it probably wouldn't be in the child's best interest. And as it was, it wasn't. And she probably gave birth in the car that she had, that was discovered on the motorway in flames, because the car had got some sort of technical failure and the car caught alight, and that then set off a whole series of the police trying to find them and identify them and stuff. And the child was born alive, but unfortunately the child died very soon after, because they were camping outside in very cold weather, and it was minus whatever the temperature was, so it was a -degree temperature, very, very cold, and no one knows if the child died by hypothermia or the mother rolled and squished it. So this is Constance's chart, and we're looking at it, there's the viewpoint that if you want to mother or be mothered, what would be the better way of doing it? Now, obviously, if you give birth to a child, it's best that there's some sort of professional on hand somewhere that's going to check your kiddie over. You might be pretty good at giving birth, but you're not a medical expert. You don't know everything about babies, and giving birth in a car is a very risky thing to do, and not necessary to happen in the UK, especially if you are have inherited a vast amount of money and are spending things like £450 to get into cabs to escape from one place to another because you feel that you're being persecuted by the authorities. Anyway, I'm not going to read you everything to do with what happened, but this is her chart. So she's got Sun sign Taurus with no aspects to it. And I've mentioned once before about a lady that I read for that lived in a commune, and she also had a sun sign Taurus that was unaspected by any other planet. And this particular client couldn't understand why the other members of the commune, she felt that they didn't she didn't feel part of the commune. So it makes you ask the question, what was she part of the commune for if she didn't feel part of it? But anyway, she was struggling with how she perceived other people as being. Now, the sun in the chart is how we shine, it's what we do, but it isn't our motivator. The moon is the unconscious that will talk to us in our sleep and tell us stuff and have a go at us and all the rest of it. And if the sun is completely unaspected, which happens in numerous charts, we need to astrologically, but what does that sun sign need the most to feel safe and secure? And a Taurus is going to need some money and a house and a roof over their head and all the rest of it. And when she was eventually arrested, they had been camping in an allotment, and none of this was necessary. She was not short of money. So a Taurus is going to need a roof over their head. They're going to need 3 meals a day. They're going to need to feel safe and secure. And she was not looking after her sun sign. And then her moon is in the sign of Capricorn, 1 degree. I've used 6 a.m, so it could be any degree in Capricorn later than that. And regardless of even if it wasn't Capricorn, it would still be conjunct to Neptune. And when the moon and Neptune are conjunct, the moon is how we feel and Neptune is the psychic wobbly planet. And emotionally, we want to feel connected to the cosmos. We want to feel the divine inspiration that is further than us. We could probably do that by taking loads of drugs and stuff, or we could do it the other way by hitting some sort of spiritual place. Hopefully the person either does religion, but not excessively so, or gets into astrology and understands himself. None of that happened here, obviously. But the moon and Neptune, the moon, the feelings want, and especially being in Capricorn, the seriousness, moon in Capricorn persons want their feelings to be taken seriously. They don't want fluffy, like I've got moon in Gemini. They don't want the fluffy stuff at all. They want the seriousness of it and the connection to something more than their feelings, as something bigger and outside of themselves. So exploring more than just who they are. The moon is also conjunct going the other way around to Uranus. So I'll read you some official blurb, apart from just my interpretation of. Now I'm quoting from astro.com from their AstroClick portrait, it's called. And when the moon is conjunct Neptune, you're very sensitive to the emotions of the people you're with. You pick up their moons and make them your own. You pick up their moods and make them your own. So it's very important to be with people who are good for you emotionally. You're a dreamer, not very practical, preferring to sit by yourself and play in your private fantasy world. Your vivid imagination makes these daydreams quite real to you, but you should be careful not to retreat into your little world every time you want to avoid the problems of the real world. On the other hand, you can be very sensitive to other people's needs. You can put yourself into someone else's shoes and understand how that person feels, which makes you very reluctant to cause pain to anyone. Now, that's not taking into account the sign of it. No computer program can do moon in Capricorn conjunct Neptune in Capricorn. They haven't got that far yet. Maybe they will one day. So moon conjunct Uranus, because she has her moon sandwiched in between the two, unless she's born much, much later in the day. But anyway, it's not going to be that far past her Uranus either. You're very likely to be an emotionally impulsive person, feelings sweep over you very quickly, and you may act in hasty, rash ways that make you regret later. But you're a free spirit and cannot stand to be confined or restricted. Instead of knowing that you need excitement and going out to find it, you might attract people who are exciting but not very stable. Some people can hurt you because they're usually not very sensitive. You may also feel that you can't depend on other people, so it would be a good idea to avoid situations in which you have to depend on others. It isn't that you're being so unreliable, it's simply that you have a strong need to be on your own emotionally. Now, there isn't really a signature when the moon is sandwiched between those planets for someone who is going to find it easy to live a life of domestic stability. When we're considering looking after children and being the parent to them, emotional stability is utmost as much as possible, because the more emotionally out of control a parent is, the harder it is for a child to feel safe and secure. Now, if you have that signature, I'm not saying that you can't be a parent yourself, but you need to be aware of what your moon needs. If you've got Uranus on one side, I want to be free, Neptune on the other side, I'm very sensitive, then you need to get some help, basically, not do everything on your own, and get help that isn't going to suffocate you. But this case, it's not a case, because it's not, when I use the word case, I don't mean in a client situation setting. This person is not a client of mine. I'm just making a comment about something that's in the news. Were I working with a client like this, I would be supporting and pointing out to them, or helping them understand for themselves what support they might need. This didn't happen with this particular person, and the last few weeks before they were arrested with their partner were as chaotic as chaos could be. Uranus transiting didn't help, but I'm not going to blame the planets here for what happened to this person. It's perfectly possible to have this chart and to live a successful life. It's the people that you surround yourself with that either are going to support you in what you do or not. And I don't want to sound critical of Constance. I definitely am critical of someone who allows their child to die for whatever reason without seeking medical help. I'm in complete agreement with the sentence that they've been given, because that is a criminal act. Now, the dad, so the father of the child, is called Mark. So in his chart, he's a little bit older than her. So she's born in 87. He's born on the 8th of June 1974. He was born in the UK, and I think he went to the US when he was 12. And when he was 14, he attacked and raped a next door neighbour, put a stocking over his face, and held her, I don't know what the word is, but didn't allow her free for 4 hours, and she had 2 children in another room in the house. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison, or came out after 22 years in prison and returned to the UK, or was exported, I can't remember. He's a sun sign Gemini, and his he doesn't have Mercury in Gemini. Where's his Mercury gone? He's a sun sign Gemini. His Mercury's in Cancer, conjunct Saturn, and his Mars is in Cancer. He's got Venus in Taurus. Constance is a Taurus. He's got Jupiter in Pisces, Moon also in Capricorn. Again, I've used 6 a.m. If he's born later in the day, maybe the Moon could be in Aquarius. I have the feeling that they probably both have Moon in Capricorn. That might have been why they managed to stay together through the pregnancies, 5 in total, because they had a similar way of being emotionally. Don't know, that's just... Neptune in Sagittarius retrograde, Uranus in Libra, and Pluto in Libra. They're not conjunct, but they are both retrograde. The Sun is aspecting, the Sun square Jupiter, the Sun's trine Uranus, and the Sun is in opposition to Neptune. So both parents had, inverted commas, astrological issues with Neptune. So Daddy has Sun opposition Neptune, Mummy has Moon conjunct Neptune, without understanding what Neptune's all about. Because I sometimes feel if people could understand a little bit about the planets in their charts, maybe their lives would be easier. Who knows? Now, we don't have a time of birth for the child, or even a date of birth, but I've used a possible date. She was seen in late December, heavily pregnant. I've estimated that the child could have been born on the 28th of December, going by the news reports, and how old she was estimated to be when she died. She definitely was a little girl, and they named her Victoria. They put her body into a little shopping bag and left it with some other items, including lots of leaves, and in fact carried the body around in the carrier bag, and then eventually abandoned the child in the allotment shed, which the child was discovered later. So I estimate that the child was a Capricorn, and the date I've used is the 28th of December 2022, and I've just done an astrological thing because it feels right for no particular reason other than the astrology of it. The child could have been born at 9 o'clock in the evening, possibly born in the back seat of the car, which means that the child's Neptune is 22 degrees Pisces, and so is the moon as well. So the moon's exactly conjunct Neptune. Pisces is the sign, moon in Pisces is the sign of suffering, and I would have thought that the child probably was suffocated by mummy unintentionally, but she had been warned by previous social workers when she'd had a previous child not to go to co-sleep with the child because she ran the risk of squishing it or suffocating it, and this was a very, very, very newborn baby. But anyway, so possibly 4 planets in Capricorn. Now, the child was definitely born at some point between December and early January, because the burning car and the mother getting out of the car, a man stopped on the motorway to see the couple by the side of the motorway. So this man took a film of the burning car, because it's not every day you see a burning car on the motorway, and spoke to the couple, and they said they just wanted to drive 10 minutes down the road, didn't say why. And he saw that the woman had something sort of, she was what you call a baby sling, he saw the head of the baby in the sling that Constance was wearing. So the child will definitely have had Sun in Capricorn, and Venus, because they wouldn't have shifted, and Mercury in Capricorn, and definitely Pluto. So there's a stellium of 4 Capricorn planets, remembering of course that mummy and daddy have moon in Capricorn. Child has 4 planets in Capricorn, definitely Saturn in Aquarius, Neptune definitely in Pisces, not too sure about the moon, but I've done that date. Jupiter 0 degrees Aries, Uranus 15 degrees Taurus, and retrograde. So Uranus was retrograde, 15 degrees Taurus, and mummy is 24 degrees Taurus, so there's quite an erratic energy in that Uranus next to mummy's sun sign. Mars retrograde in Gemini, remembering of course that Mark, the father, has Sun in Gemini. So there's a number of connections between the parents and the child, so baby Victoria. Constance has Mercury, 5 degrees Gemini. Mark has Sun, 17 degrees Gemini. Baby has Mars retrograde Gemini, possibly 9 degrees, don't know for sure. Child, unless they've got a completely different moon sign, has a bowl chart, all the planets on one side of the circle. So anybody being born December 22, January 22, depending on what moon sign they are, the planets will all have been on one side of the chart. Mark has a splash chart, all the planets all the way around the circle. Constance has a seesaw. Now we do have some dates when things happened. I mean, I'll just mention the dates that the car was burning on the 5th of January 2023. They originally went on the run on the 27th of December 22. She was heavily pregnant. I think she probably gave birth the next day, but there's no way of proving it, and they're not telling anybody what date the baby was born. The baby was still alive on the 7th of January, possibly died on the 9th of January. They were arrested on the 27th of February 23, and that it was estimated that the baby was 3 weeks old when the baby died. And they've just been sentenced on the 15th of September this year. The transits hardly show anything. What I have made is a transit rhythmogram because I haven't got a time of birth. I definitely don't have a date of birth for the child. But the rhythmogram, which I've created for Constance, because she's the mother in this, it's her job as a mother to look after her child. And her definition of looking after it is not a regular definition of child care. And I've created the transit rhythmogram to see what might have been the biggest astrological happenings leading up. So I've created it from the year 2022 to present day 2025, going on into 2026, and to see when Uranus was conjuncting. So in 24, Uranus conjunct the Sun, and there's been all these different court cases which she disrupted. So she and him disrupted the court cases. So this transiting Uranus was conjunct the Sun in June 24, November 24, and then April 25 this year. Pluto's really not doing much. Neptune is square to the moon in 25. The courts, the judge, when he summarised the evidence that they'd given, he said he couldn't trust a word that she'd said. I'm summarising. Saturn squares to the Sun. Transiting Saturn is squaring her Sun in 22 while she's pregnant. In 23, where the death, etc., happens, transiting Saturn is square to the Sun in January. So Saturn had some, and then also squares to Mercury. So it's a very, very sad case. And when they were, inverted commas, on the run, no need for that to happen. Their parents made announcements and asked them to turn themselves in, and they didn't. And that sort of rebelliousness that was happening, there's so many positions in Constance's chart. So there's Venus opposition Pluto, there's Mars opposition Saturn, Uranus, the moon, and Neptune. There's quite a lot of, and then there's the moon is square to Jupiter. There are some trines that could have been used to benefit her, but that completely unaspected Sun in Taurus was not really working very well. The other thing that is under consideration astrologically is this chart of Constance's mother. So I wanted to see whether or not the issue with having children was inherited in any way. Did mummy also have a problem? Well, her mother did, because she sent her, I can't remember where it was, somewhere she went abroad and sent her to some religious group that was run by some absolute weirdos. I can't remember why she sent her abroad, but anyway, apparently the mother is a psychologist. I'm glad I'm not her client. And the mother's called Virginie, Virginie. We have a date of birth for her. She's the 14th of September 1959. We've got the Sun in Virgo, Moon in Aquarius, Mercury in Virgo, Venus in Virgo, Mars in Libra, Jupiter Scorpio, Saturn Capricorn, Uranus Leo, Neptune Scorpio, and Pluto in Virgo. So Mother has a cluster of 4 planets in Virgo. The Sun is conjunct Mercury and square to Saturn, but in Virgo there's Venus retrograde, which is conjunct to Pluto, which isn't a particularly friendly aspect, and the Sun is conjunct Mercury. I've used whole sign. Uranus is in opposition to the Moon, so she then gives birth to a child where the Moon and Uranus are conjunct. So this issue within the family is a Uranus and Neptune thing. I mean, Mum's aspects from Neptune aren't, it doesn't aspect the Moon at all. Neptune's in the sign of Scorpio along with Jupiter, doesn't make an aspect. But the Moon is in opposition to Uranus. Again, and with the Moon being in Aquarius, it can be more difficult to feel that you've been mothered. If you're born with the moon in Aquarius, your childhood could seem quite bleak and not very fluffy and cuddly. It's the moon of independence. This is a person that doesn't want to be cuddled all the time. Moon in Aquarius. That's different from the sun. The sun in Cancer is going to be cuddled every 30 seconds. The mother, so Constance's mother, has a bowl chart. All the planets are on one side of the circle, and as I say, there's the moon and Uranus in opposition. She gives birth to a child that has moon conjunct Uranus, but Neptune is what I believe, because they're telling of their stories. There was so much lying to themselves, really, probably telling themselves, this is Constance and Mark now, telling themselves that what they were doing was for the best. It wasn't the best for poor Victoria, who didn't live long enough, didn't live a life at all. So a very, very sad case. Now, equally, it's very possible to have that signature. There's plenty of charts that I could have shared, because I checked on astro.com. If you're born with those signatures, does your life always necessarily need to be disastrous? There were, unfortunately, a number of children that were born with moon conjunct Neptune that didn't survive or didn't live very long. For some reason, Astro Databank has in there a number of charts, moon conjunct Neptune, when the child dies very early, but that's not a signature of a child dying. It's just unusual that there were more than there were in other conjunctions of planets. But the combo of moon, Neptune, Uranus, the moon is such a delicate little planet, and Uranus is not delicate. Neptune can be delicate, but it does pick up stuff from places that aren't conscious. And as I read to you from astro.com, the person with moon and Neptune conjunct is going to be very sensitive. I think they're called highly sensitive people, HSP. So picking up absolutely everything. Now, as a Sun in Pisces person, I know how that can feel, but I've learned over the years how to manage it. Picking up everybody's feelings all the time isn't conducive to good mental health. Other people's feelings are other people's. They're not ours, and it's necessary to park them somewhere, those other people's feelings. Okay, those are not mine, and being able to work and practice on identifying what our own feelings are. So if you have that signature, you've got moon conjunct Uranus or Neptune, then do ping me an email and we'll talk about your chart and your experience and how it's been for you on the podcast. In episode 209, I covered the chart of Charles Dickens, who was born with the moon and Neptune conjunct in the sign of Sagittarius. So it is perfectly possible to have moon conjunct Neptune and for it to be a positive thing and to be able to work with it. I'm not saying that moon conjunct Neptune means that you suffocate your child and they die. That isn't what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the moon is made overly sensitive, and that needs to be used for the benefit rather than the detriment. But people, when they have that combo, can get very confused and things can easily get out of control, which is exactly what happened here. If you'd like to have a discounted reading, then pop over to my website. A pop-up will come up, unless you've banned pop-ups, and the pop-up will give you a code, and you can use that code to be able to book a reading with me, and the code is valid until the end of this year, which is 2025. So you can use that code leading up to the end of this year for a 20% discount on any reading. So that's psychic readings, astrology readings and palmistry readings. And just a reminder, I am once again going back to face-to-face consultations. So if you live in Bath or the surrounding areas, you're very welcome to make an appointment and come to my home office for your reading, and we'll record your session and you can listen back to it afterwards. Face-to-face in-person consultations, I digitally record the reading and upload it to WeTransfer, or just send you the audio, whichever way you want to do it, or you can use your mobile phone. Sometimes people do that. So I hope you have a fab week. Next week we have a special guest. We'll have Mandy Lockley, who's an astrologer, healer, intuitive empath, light worker, speaker, author and psychic medium. So she'll be with us next week. So I hope you have a fab week. Bye bye now.